Going live.
Hello, everyone out there in Literati world. I'm Elin Hilderbrand. Welcome to the Beach and Beyond book group. I'm super excited today, super jazzed. I am talking to Jean Hanff Korelitz, who wrote, among other fabulous books, The Plot. I'm going to say The Plot has been my favorite book of 2021. I read it while I was on tour in June, and it really spoke to me and sort of saved my life. And we can maybe talk about that a little bit later. But Jean, welcome to Literati.
Thank you.
I guess let's start. You know, the ladies in my group really want to start by talking about the book. So can you tell us how you came up with the plot and the characters of the plot?
I have to warn you, it's a weird story.
I want to hear it. We all want to hear it.
I have written novels that I literally thought about for 20 years before I wrote the first word. This was not that. I was in the middle of another novel that was just not working, and my beloved editor, kept turning it down. It was very demoralizing, and we were in the middle of an editorial meeting in her office in which she was turning down my book, that I just found myself kind of spilling out this idea. And I barely had this idea. I was kind of spinning it as I was telling her. And it was a story about this washed up writer who does something he probably shouldn't, even though I would be hard pressed to condemn what he does. But he knows it's probably on the wrong side of the line. And he becomes immensely successful, but he can't enjoy it because he's too scared that somebody's going to come out of the woodwork and accuse him. And of course somebody does. And I'm telling her this, and she's getting she's into it. I can see she's excited. And remember, she's not buying the book I've been writing for years. So this is making me feel good. And then I told her what this stolen plot is. And her mouth dropped open. And that was a great moment for me because I had been secretly worried that even though I had never come across this particular plot twist, that doesn't mean it's not out there somewhere. And even though I've read lots and lots and lots of novels, she's read every novel. So I was a little worried she was going to say, "Ooh, Lily King did that." "Ooh, Jonathan Franzen did that." And then I would be back to square one, but she didn't. And then miraculously, she bought both books. And remember, I had walked into that meeting unable to get her to buy the book that I'd been working on. And the decision that we made was for me to put aside the novel that I just kept hitting my head against the wall, and write this other thing. And then we had the pandemic, and suddenly I was in a very isolated house in upstate New York, and very, very scared, and very, very mad. And, when I'm scared and mad, I go on a news blackout. I don't read the paper. It was really a kind of perfect storm for me to write this novel in 4 or 5 months, which is ridiculous, absurd. Yeah. And frankly, if you came to me and said, "Oh, I just wrote a novel in 4 or 5 months," I'd say, "I'll wait for the next
one." Very good.
He probably needs to be put aside and then come back to it. But in this case, it was really a once in a lifetime situation, fueled by hopefully a once in a lifetime, global situation that we were all in. So really hope it never, ever, ever happens again. But I am so grateful that I had this thing to work at, to sort of be connected to the world because other people were involved in it, waiting for it. And it made me feel like I was doing something in a really, really bad time.
Right. I loved this book so much. And the thing that's actually astonishing, that speaks to your talent as a writer, and is that not only that you're doing so many things in this book, it's about, and okay, so I'm naturally prejudiced towards it because I'm a writer. In the beginning, I'm completely hooked. It's very, very hard. When I've been reading lately, I've been really focusing on the beginnings of books and how do you hook the reader? How do you get them invested in what you're trying to tell them? You have to set you have to set it up. You have to introduce your characters. It's hard. The beginning of a
It's all
book
hard, but you're
is
right.
hard. And I immediately identified with Jacob because he's a writer. He's a mid-list writer. He has this like kooky teaching job in a low residency MFA program. I workshopped my entire life up until the time I got published. I mean, I went to Breadloaf. I went to the University of Iowa Writers Workshop. I did the 92nd Street Y in New York. Like I did every like notable workshop. I did not do a low residency program, but I was certainly aware they existed. And his sense of like sort of hopeless, like mediocrity really spoke to me because I feel like every writer, like it doesn't matter how successful you are, like every writer has that bleak moment in every book. Like,
and we live in it. We live in it, no matter how far in the rearview mirror it might be. We are all failures in our own minds.
Oh my gosh. So I immediately sympathized with him. And then the intriguing thing with the kid coming to him with the plot and him thinking, oh, and then he dies. And then the plot is, in Jacob's mind, like up for grabs. And in fact, he writes a really good book using this plot.
Right.
And then it unspools from there. Okay, so that's one of the things that you do. And you also write a novel within the novel, right? Jacob writes the crux, which is
tried to get out of that. I noticed your next selection is Lily King. Lily King is deeply involved in this whole story because I had rashly told my editor that I would be providing these books, chapters of the novel within the novel, but I didn't want to do it. It was a lot of work and it was scary. Yeah. All this stuff. And then in the middle of writing this book, I heard an interview with Lily King where she was talking about Writers and Lovers, which is also about a writer who writes a successful book. And somebody in the interview said, didn't you think of giving us a little taste of this book? And she said, I realized that whatever I wrote, it wouldn't be good enough to justify the publishing frenzy over this book. So I decided not to do it. And I told my editor, I don't have to do it either because Lily King's not doing hers. And she said, no, you have to do it. So I did it. And of course, I'm glad I did it. But I did try to get out of doing it because it really was, it was quite a challenge.
Correct. And the one of the challenges is you have to make his voice sound different from the authorial voice that's telling your novel.
Exactly.
So that's super challenging. And I felt like, one of the enormous successes of this book is that you do both. So you write a really good book within the book that actually doesn't mimic the book that you're writing, which is kind of a mind twist, but that was a very successfget part of the book.
I'm glad you said that was a concern of mine that
of course.
It's hard not to write like yourself.
Yeah.
You get to our age, I don't know what age you are, but if you've written a certain number of novels, you've worked through a lot of that stuff. You've found your voice. To write like somebody else is a hardship. So I had to really kind of interrogate everything that I wrote in those chapters.
So, and then the other thing that I don't know if our viewers are going to appreciate this, but I'm a novelist and I appreciate it. The line to line, Jean, the sentence to sentence is sheer perfection. I cannot tell you, maybe you have to be a writer to just appreciate how fabulous your sentences are and how, and I'm reading along and I'm in the car. So I was on tour, for the Golden Girl, and I was in the South. I was in South Carolina, North Carolina, and I was in the car for extended. I had a driver, so I was reading.
I'm glad you weren't reading while you were driving.
No, for extended periods of time, and I'm like, oh my gosh, and I'm screaming. I'm like, the sentence to sentence is so good. So if you're an aspiring writer watching this, I highly suggest you read the plot, look at the sentence structure. It is so perfect. Okay.
And that may be the ex-poet in me who left poetry behind, but and that's not to say that I write flowery poetic language. I did for a while. I moved past that. But I think when you begin as a poet, you're writing, with your ears wide open. And I cannot knowingly leave an ugly sentence on the page.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, they're not there. I may have missed them, but if I hear it, I can't go forward until it's gone.
Or a dull sentence or a throwaway sentence. I mean, that's the thing. It's like it is a book of perfect sentences. And it's
Wow.
so, I mean, it's really that was like the number one thing about the book, like the plot and the twists and everything else aside. It was just like the way that like each sentence was interesting and crafted. And I'm like, oh God, this is fabulous.
Music
have
to
a
my
question
ears coming from another writer. Thank you.
about the gender. So did you consider at any time making Jacob a woman?
You know, it's not that I never considered it. It's just that it came to me that way. And, you know, it is true that part of me thought, you know, I've never done this before. I should try to do this, you know, with all the conversations we're having now about lived experience and fiction. And, you know, I am in the corner of imagination. I think writers should be able to write whatever they want, whether it is their lived experience or not. I think that's a rule that sounds super, that we should only write about things we know. But if we really want to apply that rule, we're going to have to say goodbye to, I'm going to go with 99% of the novels that we have loved. You better be prepared to do that. I'm not. So I should be able to write a male character. I mean, a male protagonist. I've only tried my novel, The White Rose, I have here. That has 3 protagonists and 1 is male, but that's the only time that I've ever tried to do it. And he just kind of came fully formed. So I didn't want to retrofit him into a female persona. Yeah.
Right. I mean, he's completely convincing. I just think it's so interesting that the entire book and it feels, I mean, it definitely feels right. I mean, the poor dude. And it's like I mean, he's really hapless in some sense.
I mean, failing, and he has worked really hard. And I'll tell you, people ask me if I like Jake. There's so much about Jake not to like. I mean, do I want to have a beer with Jake? No, I don't. But I will tell you the one thing that I do admire about him, and that is that he never blames anybody else for his failure. He never says the publishers don't like me, or they're not interested in a white male, or he knows the reason that he is failing is that he has not written a good enough book. It is on him, and that I can really respect about him.
Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about the sort of crux of the novel, which is so there was that article in the New Yorker, right? What was the name of that article?
Well, there was the cat person story, and now there's the kidney person story.
Is the kidney person. Yeah. No, we're talking about the kidney. I can't remember the name of the article, but it's about whose idea? Bad art friend. Thank you. Someone said
bad art friend, right?
Okay. Can you sort of, I mean, talk about like how you feel? Is it okay to use someone else's story?
We do all the time. I mean, like this novel that it's just right next to me is based on the Strauss opera Der Rosenkavalier. It is, you know, that is a story set in the 18th century. Set in the 18th century, but written at the beginning of the 20th century, itself based on a French novel of a century earlier that I have adapted in this book to the 1990s in New York City. And everybody's Jewish, which you can believe they were not in the original. So, I mean, it's not where you start. It's what you do with what you use. And if you are going to tell me that your novel in progress or your published novel does not owe something, and probably a lot, to the stories that you have absorbed as a reader, as a film viewer, as a TV watcher, you're wrong. I mean, I may have to do a little research, but I will explain to you how you're wrong. We have to accept that we are in a kind of river of stories. We didn't start the river. The river will go on after we are gone. And that is the beauty of what we do. And it's the beauty of any kind of creative act. So acknowledge your debt to those who came before you, but do your work and add to the river. God, that's very arty farty, but yeah, that's how I believe. That's what I
So
believe.
do you feel like Jacob's problem could have how could he have solved his problem
He
before?
could have he could have doubled, he could have investigated his student, seen if the story had been shared with anybody else, maybe asked permission of a
Right.
surviving family member, but he wasn't going to do that. I mean, any
Yeah.
more than Leonard Bernstein and Stephen Sondheim were going to contact Shakespeare's heirs to see if it was all right to take Romeo and Juliet and make it into West Side Story.
Yeah.
And besides, my far better educated than myself husband has informed me that Shakespeare himself, of all of those plays, only one was an original story. Every other one was adapted from some kind of source material. And that was The Tempest. So,
Wow.
let's not get too purist about any of this stuff. No, his bad move was, I guess, the secrecy. Maybe he should have put an author's note saying, I first heard this incredible story from my late student. Yeah, I don't know. But he's afraid. I mean, he has every reason to be afraid, because we know what happens to authors who appropriate. They are ripped into little itty bitty pieces, sometimes on a couch, presided over by a media mogul whose name begins with O. And it is not a fun thing to watch, and I can imagine it is not a fun thing to go through, and it is forever. And in the case of that particular person that I'm referring to, the person on the couch, that was the guy who stole from himself. Right. So imagine if we are talking about somebody who stole from someone else. Merciless. Right. It would be merciless and career ending. He's right to be afraid, I think.
Okay, I'm going to pivot a little bit to talk about. I'm fascinated by how you started this, which was by saying that your editor turned down a book that you submitted, and then am I to understand that she then actually did buy that book?
Yes, and I'm so happy to say that last week she finally accepted the final, thank God, final draft of the book.
Okay.
And it's coming out in May.
And what is it called?
Very happy with it. It's called The Latecomer. Very appropriately called The Latecomer.
That's very funny.
Yeah.
So what did you do, Jean, between turning it in? Can you talk about that work? Because I feel like that's a valuable.
Yeah, I'll tell you exactly what I did. I wrote another novel.
Okay.
And I tried not to think about it for about 6 months before going back and looking at it. And with her help, because she is a phenomenal editor, I saw what I could not see before. I saw the way out, and I saw what had to happen, and what I needed to do, and then I did it.
Right. So you rewrote it, essentially.
Yep.
Big revisions.
Yep.
Very exciting. So one of the things I'm not sure that our readers, first of all, I'll start by saying, let's have this conversation first, because this is so much fun.
All right.
The first book I read of yours was Admission. I read this. I don't know, what year did this book come out? Because I read it a long time ago.
I want to say 2012, 2011.
Came out in 2009.
Oh, there you go. There you go.
So I read it in 2010. Right. And I absolutely loved it because I am an admissions geek.
Yeah.
And then in like a previous text conversation, like to find out that you're also an admissions geek.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I never got over getting rejected from Yale. Okay, I'll just put that out there. Never got over. Yeah. And I definitely went to the right place. I had a great education, but I never got over it. And I kept up with all the news, and then I am a Princeton faculty spouse. I have been since the late 1980s. And so I had a front row seat to a generation of Princeton students, and they are fantastic. They are fantastic students. But there are other fantastic students out there who didn't get into Princeton. That continued to fascinate me. I also saw how the student body had changed in that generation. They had gone from a kind of all-rounded kid to a class of not well-rounded kids. I mean, a well-rounded class. So I was fascinated by that. And then I read this really, really interesting book called The Chosen by a scholar at Berkeley, I believe, which looks at 100 years of selective admissions at Harvard, Yale, and Princeton throughout the 20th century. And it is absolutely a game changer in the way that you see this thing. The first thing you have to do is get out of seeing it through your own, through your experience or your kids' experience. You have to see it as a kind of, as a big amoebic social movement rather than just an individual experience. And you will never think of admissions the same way. So then I went to the dean of admissions at Princeton and I said, I want to write a book about Ivy League admissions. Can I work for you? And I worked for 2 years as an outside reader for Princeton, which is like an extra reader.
Right.
I was not an admissions officer. I was a
hired. They sent you the full applications or just the essays? They sent you the whole thing?
Oh, I read the whole application, but I was not in the room saying, take this one, don't take this one. I asked a lot. I was not permitted. So when I wrote those scenes in admission, I had to make that all up. So, but I think I got it pretty good.
I feel like it used to be, I don't know. I'm 52. I went to Johns Hopkins. I did not get into Princeton, nor did I get into Brown. I got waitlisted at Brown. Very bitter. Maybe that's why, maybe that is the thing that drives my fascination with admissions. But I went to Johns Hopkins.
At Brown. So let's hear it for the Brown waitlist.
Okay. I bet they're crying now. What was I going to say? Oh, so I went to Johns Hopkins. I worked in the admissions office, but it used to be, I think, like I gave tours and then I interviewed kids coming in when I was a senior. I got paid $5 per interview to do that job. I feel like it used to be that colleges wanted these well-rounded kids with like the 10 million activities and the blah, blah, blah. And now you would agree that's changed. Now they want the specialized kid, right? The kid who has something extraordinary, like these top universities. So, can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, I remember when my husband had only been at Princeton for about 10 years, there was actually, I don't think it was like a big organized thing, but I do think the admissions office came to the faculty and said, how are we doing? Is there anything we could be doing better? And the message that they got from the faculty, this was the 1990s, was we want fewer kids who are pretty good at everything. And we want more kids who are brilliant at one thing, but can't tie their shoes. Right? Yeah. And that makes sense because the faculty had been those kids. They had been brilliant at something, couldn't tie their shoes. And that, looking forward is really the direction that the admissions office turned toward. And I believe that's a broader trend. And by the way, I'm still involved in the field in that I freelance for a very principled college counselor. She's not
I know.
And one of the reasons I enjoy working with her so much is because she is so principled. So I'm still in the game and I really love it because I love, and this is what I loved about reading applications as well. I loved, you really can feel good about the future if you hear what these kids, and obviously they're putting their best feet forward. We know that, but they're pissed off, they're excited, they're critical. They can't wait to get in there and start cleaning up the mess we made. And I respect that so deeply, and we need that. So, you come away from reading these applications and you think, I think we might be okay.
That's wonderful. Okay, we have about 5 minutes left, and I want to talk about, you should have known, another one of Geek's fabulous novels. Okay, but for those of you watching, so you may or may not know that this was the novel on which the HBO series, The Undoing. So I want to talk, I have not yet gotten any of my novels onto the screen. So I want to talk about this particular, I know that Admissions was made into a movie with Tina Fey.
I got that one here too.
Yeah. So cute. I want to talk about this particular project and how, what I want to talk about is how it went from book 2, like last year's, like a Billy Joel was like, I don't know what you guys are doing, but I'm going to watch the last episode of The Undoing.
Wait, did Billy Joel say that?
Yes, on his Instagram. Billy Joel was like, I'm going to go home and watch the last episode of The Undoing. I'm serious.
This is amazing.
Everybody was watching it. I mean, it was a
Well, I
phenomenon.
was watching it too because I didn't know who did it. I mean, and if that tells you how different the book was from the TV show, I mean, I didn't know who did it until I saw it with everybody else.
Okay.
And I was wrong. I thought it was the friends. So there you go.
So, so they changed the story a great deal. And can you talk about, did they run that past you? I mean, obviously not, but like how you felt about that, and also how you felt about them changing the title.
Okay, so whatever Zen I attained in this process, I attained from the admission experience. Admission was significantly changed from the book, but that was hailed next to the changes in The Undoing. And I did react the first time. I was like, oh my God, this is awful. But then I let go, which you have to do. If you're gonna sell your book, you say go with God, and that's it. In this case, it was David E. Kelley himself who bought the book. He said at the outset, I'll be going in a different direction. It's going to be more of a whodunit. And I was like, chill. I'm so chill. I'm so zen, whatever you want. Look, he's David E. Kelley,
Sure.
No, David E. Kelley, you can't make any changes. As far as the name change, I read that in the press release. I mean, I had no word at all. So I'm sitting there on my phone going, what? So there you go. I was able to visit the set a couple of times, and the bizarre thing about doing that is that on one hand, you have this incredible feeling of pride because everybody who's running around, whether they're putting tape on the floor or getting coffee or preparing to star or directing, they are all there because of something you made up in your pajamas. And that is an incredibly exciting feeling. On the other hand, you are the least important person on the movie set. Right. I was introduced to people as the author of the novel, and they would say, oh, there's a novel. I mean, you are not nearly as important as the person putting the tape on the floor.
Right.
To the product that we all saw on our screen. So, I mean, it's a real kind of, you got to get your head around this. You're allowed to feel pride. You're allowed to feel like you've accomplished something. But on the other hand, you could fall through the floor, the taped floor, and nobody would notice you were gone. So,
right. I mean, one of the problems with them changing the title, because I think a lot of writers, the way they make their money off the movies isn't necessarily that you get an enormous amount of money when the movie is made, but is that then you go and sell books. And so I talked to Michael Connelly about this because his Bosch series was on Amazon, and he said to me, if you ever get anything made, Ellen, make sure they keep the title.
Yeah. Because
when they don't keep the title, you don't know that when you're looking at this, I mean, it says here at the top, but it's not the same as being like, oh, that's the mini series. So
and
that's
we didn't publish the book as, The Undoing previously published as, but it didn't get on the bestseller list even after that. So, look, I'm incredibly grateful for everything that's happened. So my feeling is, I mean, this is all fun and it's wonderful and exciting, but at the end of the day, the book is the part that I did. And, the plot is my 7th published novel. I think it's important to remember that most people had never heard of me until Nicole Kidman was wearing a green coat on their TV. The books have not changed a word since they were published, since I wrote them. They are right there. You can get them. You're having the exact same experience as if you had gone in on the publication day to the bookstore and bought it, I hope. So, I have to be grateful for that. It's not like I'm making apples and, the apple came out in 2009 and it's kind of, you don't want to eat it anymore.
Right.
These apples are just the same as they were.
Excellent. Well, Jean, thank you so much for joining me. Everybody, if you haven't, read this, sheerly amazing novel. And then Jean, have your publicist send me the latecomer.
Well,
I'm excited. I'm super excited.
It is a very different book.
Doesn't matter. I'm so excited.
I'm glad we finally got there.
I love it. Thank you so much. And thank you guys all at home for watching. You guys are the best.